there. And do we have a good video for you, or at least a good car, because this is the 2022 Porsche 911 GT3. The Porsche 911 by itself is a good car, but that's just the starting point for what Porsche's racing division does to the GT3. Now, I called the previous version of this car, the old one, the best driving car there is. Can the new one possibly live up to that sort of hype? Let's find out. Porsche has been making the GT3 for over 20 years. The first one came out in 1999. It was the 996 GT3. Then they made the 997, they made the 991, and this is the new one, the 992. Well, what is a GT3? Well, again, you take your 911 as a starting point, and you typically put in a racier, more higher revving engine, and then you just kind of start trimming and tuning and refining it until you've made the best track vehicle you possibly can. Let me give you an example. So the new one here, it only has a 2 horsepower increase from the old one, which is negligible, right? However, this one is nearly 18 seconds a lap quicker around the Nürburgring Nordschleife than the 991 GT3. That's incredible. So, who's the competition? Well, you could argue there isn't any, but of course you could also argue there's always competition. So Lamborghini still makes the Huracan, and that has a high revving, naturally aspirated V10. Corvette is about to drop the new Z06, which will be a direct competitor. And then McLaren makes the 600 LT, which is a fairly lethal track weapon. But I gotta point out that the little Porsche here, it competes against all those big dogs, even though it still only has 6 naturally aspirated cylinders. As far as the design goes, a couple years ago, I was lucky enough to attend the launch of the last GT3. And I'll never forget something that Andy Pruinger said. Now, he's the boss of the Porsche GT3, and he was explaining all of the aerodynamic tweaks they'd made and how it's more slippery and it's more efficient and there's more downforce. And he ended the design discussion by saying, and the GT3 must be the best looking 911. Well, he was right then, and I think he's right now, with the possible exception of the Targa, but that's another video. Look at this thing. It's gorgeous, right? Couple things, and I think they don't work as well in 2 dimensions in photos as they do in real life, but these nostrils here, just like on the Lamborghini SVJ, they're maybe a little off-putting at first, but they're functional, right? It's throwing air up over the windscreen and, venting air out of the front. I'm also not a huge fan of these body-colored rings around the lights. That's optional, you don't need to get them. Speaking of body-colored here, you've got the same rings on the wheels, or center lock wheels, just like GT3s normally have. Don't do that, just keep it a solid color, that'll be fine. But then aside from that stuff, I mean, what can you say? How do you critique this? This is one of the most iconic shapes in the history of the automobile, and Porsche, they're just the masters of just keeping it looking fresh all these years later. I mean, look at these hips, look at that, right? Look at the C-pillar, just absolutely perfect. And then it gets better as you keep coming back. Look at the wing. For this generation, it's hanging off these swan neck uprights right here. It's just so cool. It just screams racy, track day, motorsports, awesome. I love the way this thing looks. I think it's an absolutely knockout design. I'm inside the GT3, and as far as interior design goes, this is subtle yet effective. It's got everything you want and nothing you don't. Allow me to try and explain. Yes, it's a lot like a 911 in here with some crucial differences. For one, the steering wheel is so good. It's wrapped in Alcantara. It's my favorite material for a steering wheel. If you could get rid of these little buttons right here, it would be even better because, when you're driving hard, this part of your hand might turn the volume on or something like that. But anyways, it's really, really good, as is the shifter. Now, this isn't a PDK car, an automatic. On the regular 911, the shifter for the auto, it's like this big puck thing. It's exactly like these little HVAC controls, only a bit bigger. The Porsche GT division, they agreed with me. It's kind of so they got rid of it. Instead, they put in an automatic shift lever here that looks just like a manual. So if you want to change gears without using the paddles, you can do so here. That said, just use the paddles. They're really, really good. Most of the functionality of the car is controlled through the infotainment screen, and that is the same as a regular 911. But we still have great redundant controls, right? I've got a volume knob, I've got a tuning knob, I mentioned the HVAC controls, that's great. And then this stuff here, look, front end lift, make the shocks harder, turn the traction control off, turn traction and stability control off. They're actual physical buttons. It's just super smart the way they laid it out. Materials are great, it's leather, some contrast stitching, a nice piece of aluminum. Boom, done with it. There's no flourishes or anything unnecessary. And then you have these seats. Some of the best seats in the business. Yeah, they're carbon fiber buckets, so on a long road trip, you know, it's not gonna be that comfortable, but who cares? They perfectly hold you in place on the track, which is what they're supposed to do. Also, there's no back seat. So again, as far as the interior goes, its design, it's essentially perfect. As far as performance goes, the new GT3 is one of the best performing cars ever made. It just is. Under that wing sits the engine, still a 911, still rear engine. In this case, it's a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat or boxer 6 motor that produces 502 horsepower and 346 pound-feet of torque. And you might be saying, well, those aren't big numbers, but you're forgetting how light Porsche has kept this car. This is under 3,200 pounds. All GT3s are rear-wheel drive. In this case, you get a choice between a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed dual clutch or PDK transmission. Get the manual. If you do go for the dual clutch, you'll hit 60 miles an hour in about 3 seconds. So this car can keep up with supercars that make way more power and cost much more. But forget about the numbers. A GT3 is all about how it makes you feel. Did I mention that this engine revs to 9,000 RPM and it sounds glorious? Then there's the way it changes directions. It's basically without peer. It's just one of the finest handling cars we've ever driven. We love the way it goes, the way it moves, the way it stops. It's got these huge carbon ceramic brakes. There's really almost nothing bad to say about it in terms of performance, except for efficiency. It's not efficient. It gets 14 miles per gallon around town and 18 miles per gallon on the highway. As far as safety goes, no agency has crash tested the new GT3 yet, nor will they. In fact, no one's even crash tested a new 911 yet. So we just don't know in terms of crash ratings. As far as active automatic safety features go, the GT3 has cruise control. How much? Ain't cheap. The GT3, it begins at just under $164,000. This blue one sitting here next to me is nearly $196,000 because of just a couple options. That's the good news. Here's the reality. These are going for way over sticker. If you happen to know a Porsche dealer, and I know two, they'll give you the buddy discount of only 10% over sticker, and I know that because I've asked. If you're everybody else, you're gonna be paying between $50,000 and $100,000 over what the already high price of this car is. Again, that's reality. What about the competition? Well, that dealer markup does bring it in line with the competition because a Lamborghini Huracan Evo, you know, it starts life at just around $265,000. McLaren 600 LT, it's over $240,000. The interesting one is the Chevy Corvette Z06. Chevrolet has not announced prices for that yet. We suspect it'll start at under 100 grand. The one you want to drive is slightly over 100 grand, and that would be an actual performance bargain. As for the GT3, if you can get one anywhere near the list price, we say buy it. If there's one thing I want you to know about the 2022 Porsche 911 GT3, it's that it just won the first ever MotorTrend Performance Vehicle of the Year award. That's right, this vehicle right here beat 21 other contenders to take home the title. It's just so good. We almost have nothing negative to say about it. And I hate being in that situation because there is no perfect car, but this year, man, does this thing come close. Let me put it to you like this. After one day of driving, I hopped out of the GT3 and I said to myself, well, if it's not second place, it's first. After 3 more days of hard driving, it became obvious to not only me, but every other judge there that yes, this was the winner. Congratulations to Porsche, to Porsche GT, and to the GT3 itself for winning the 2022 MotorTrend Performance Vehicle of the Year. To see vehicle rankings and a complete buyer's guide, please visit motortrend.com/cars.